Greetings everyone and welcome back to 365 Days of Prog. Today we're gonna be reviewing the album Monster Movie by the band The Can.
Hi, my name's Naomi. I'm an avid progressive rock fan, but I'm a long ways from knowing all the prog albums out there. But this year, I'm gonna give it a try. This is 365 Days of Prog.
Okay, let me clear this up before anyone gets too confused. Today we're listening to Monster Movie from 1969 by the German band The Can. Now most of you probably know them by their simpler name, Can, and well, they actually start off with this name, so it would be most technical to actually refer to them at least by the name that they released this album under. And of course, if you're not sure who Can are, they're of course the band behind great albums like Tago Mago and of course Future Days. But yeah, I'm really getting into the review right now, so beforehand, here's some of my favorite bits from this album.
The five colors make the ear blind. Jackie said that. He actually hears the sound. I yelled that. You made a believer out of me, babe. You made a believer out of me. Got to do
So, seeing as the last time I reviewed an album by Can was all the way back in episode 76, then my ethics were a bit misplaced, and well, I did not usually go ahead and overview the history and backstories of band at the time, and seeing as I really like doing that now, I think it's only proper to actually give you a good introduction to this band, what their history is, and what led up to the creation of today's album. So our story begins in 1966 in Cologne, where a musician called Irmin Schmidt would go to the US to explore some new styles of music, mainly to explore the avant-garde and minimalist music. But much in the same vein as many things that happen to people in the US, he called himself as being corrupted by the US music, mainly by the sounds of rock music, which he took back to himself to Germany. And while coming back to Cologne, he would decide to form a band that would actually specifically be mostly avant-garde and minimalistic, and it did so with fellow members David Johnson and Holger Tsukai. Michael Caroli and Jackie Liebzeit would join the band in 1967, and in mid-1968 their probably most well-known soloist would join, and that being the American Malcolm Mooney. But seeing as in late 1968 the band was already starting to stray off from the direction of the avant-garde and minimalism more towards rock music, David Johnson decided that he didn't like this direction and left the band. Now when this band started off in 1976, their first name was actually Inner Space, but by the time that they created their debut album they were known as The Can. Yes, not Can quite yet, but The Can. And speaking of their debut album, you're probably thinking of the album we're talking about today, which is Monster Movie, but no, it's actually not. This band's debut album technically is an album called Meet Thy Pneum. And The Can did go on to record the entire album, though it being kind of a demo, and they went around record companies looking for someone to publish it, but unfortunately nobody really took the bait because the album itself was just too out there for many, so The Can went back into the studio to record something that they would call more accessible. And the result of this second recording session turned out to be 1969's Monster Movie, the first real debut album by Can that saw the light of day. And this one did succeed in being much more accessible, seeing as people really liked this, and the band itself actually got not one but two record companies to publish it, being Music Factory and Liberty Records. Now I wouldn't go over talking about the rest of this band's story, but I just have to say that the name Can can that they switch to afterwards. While we might know that it's technically an object of a can because, you know, the preposition the, but later on some people started speculating that maybe this name was actually an anagram stating the words communism, anarchism, and nihilism. I don't know, it sounds really demonic to some sense, and yeah, I just wanted to put that out there. But yeah, this resulting album would have only 4 tracks on it, but they are quite long. And as for the musical styles to be found on here, we have things like freeform jazz, psychedelic rock, and everything that has to do with experimentalism, of course to varying degrees. Now the first track on the album is called Father Cannot Yell, and this one is definitely more underground, more minimalist, and more experimentalist, and it's definitely an homage, let's call it, to the Velvet Underground. And while I didn't have any favorite bits from this one, I do feel like it is my favorite track from the entire album, as seeing as it really got me into the mood, into the psychedelic groove of things, and I just kinda enjoyed listening to it. Now the second track on the album is called Mary, Mary, So Contrary, which of course is a reference to the Old English nursery rhyme called Mary, Mary, Quite Contrary. And to me at least, this is where this album starts going down. The first thing which I didn't particularly like about this one was the bare electric guitar, which didn't really have any good effect to it, and honestly if they wanted to achieve the same effect but sounding better, they should have just used an acoustic guitar in my opinion. And the second thing, and this might be controversial, but Malcolm Mooney, I don't like his vocals that much. I don't like his voice. I don't like the fact that he always sings the same lines. I think that his voice sounds lame, and honestly I think it makes for a big part of why I just don't really connect to Can's music in the first place. And this brings me on to the next track on the album called Outside My Door. If I was content with the vocals last time, here I actually despised them. I really don't like what Malcolm Mooney is doing on here. He tries to be omnipresent because he doesn't play anything else, and it just comes off like he's not letting the other members of the band really, you know, be in the spotlight, be the main thing. And I know that his vocals aren't really too overarching and shadowing others, but still, they're just really unneeded. I listened to this song and I thought to myself, you know what? If it didn't have the vocals, I would have loved it so much more, but the inclusion of them just made me despise it. But I am being a bit too harsh on this one. It's not like I hated it to bits, I just thought that it could have been so much better. And for what it's worth, I did actually like the introduction of the harmonica on here. And flipping on to the B-side of this album, we get something that is honestly quite perplexing to me, seeing as this album was meant to be more accessible, yet it has a 20-minute long track on it. And well, this track is called You Do Right. And by God, it is just the most pure improvisation psychedelic thing that I've heard in a while. And it actually amazed me, seeing as this one is only 20 minutes, that the original recording was a 6-hour long improv session, something. I don't know how that is possible. I might have misread something, but it was basically cut down from 6 entire hours to 20 condensed minutes. Now for what it's worth, I do think that what they condensed it down to was definitely the best bits of it, and while the first half of this one I didn't particularly enjoy, I feel like the second half of this one was a real treat for me, and if I could have considered this one as one individual song, it would have been my favorite from the album. But yeah, all in all, looking at this album, I do feel like it's a pretty strong album. It does have 2 tracks in the middle, which to me they're not that good, but honestly in the grand scheme of things they're just little hiccups, so I'll let them pass. And of course this album sees Tago Mago coming right after it, or not that right after it because it came out 2 years after this one, and when it comes down to comparing the two, I have to say that I liked Monster Movie better. But yeah, with this opportunity in hand, and seeing as tomorrow's album, despite also coming from Germany, is not really your average krautrock, I think that I should use this instance right now to talk about my overall views of this subgenre of progressive rock. And honestly, seeing as I came into the series this year knowing only one krautrock album, which was of course Can's Future Days, and even that one I don't really know that well, I do feel like I had my knowledge of this subgenre expanded. Yes, I was shocked to find out that I only listened to 4 krautrock albums this entire year because it felt like much more, but I guess it's fine. All in all, I don't find that the proper krautrock music really speaks to me. There's some degree of psychedelia and experimentalism that when put together I really don't enjoy that much, and that's usually what you hear on these krautrock albums like Tago Mago, Yeti, and whatnot. But when it comes down to it, I also believe that I wasn't really exposed to enough. When it comes to symphonic rock or eclectic prog or something like that, I've definitely went into the depths of the genre, listening to many obscure bands, but when it comes to krautrock, I've listened to the surface level of things to Can and to Amon Dole, and that's about it, so I should really get deeper into this type of music. I have to say, this cover art is simply amazing. It looks so good, and despite it being pretty unrelated to the album, and I didn't think it would be related to the music itself beforehand, and now after listening to the album I definitely don't know what the connection is, I still really like how it looks. Of course, on this cover we see this huge figure, which is actually Galactus, which if I take it right, it's like a villain from the Marvel universe, and he's like consuming planets. He was made up by, of course, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, and the drawing itself that you can see on the cover is actually a retrace from the 134th edition of the Thor comics. And well, personally, I really like this one. I love the colors on this one, and if you know me, you know that I like good colors, but I also think that the sense of magnitude on here is really good. Like, you can see the hazy mountains in the background, you can see this ginormous figure just standing there, and it looks very ominous, but at the same time it just also radiates like these very calming features to it. Everything seems so unmoving in a sense. I don't get it, but I know that I love it, and yeah, that's something, I guess. So all in all, this album was actually more appealing to me than I would have guessed, and for that it's gonna get a rating of 7 out of 10. But that's about it, guys. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and stay tuned for tomorrow because we're gonna be listening to Spartacus by the band Triumvirate. I of course want to thank my lovely supporters over on Patreon, so thank you so much to Clay Wan and Rist of Kings and Lindsay Haycox. You guys are just the best, and if any of you want to support me over on Patreon, you can find the link down in the description or in my about page. But that's about it, guys. Have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Bye, guys.